What does it mean to be a purpose-led brand? It's a big question, and we're unpacking it this morning live in this Financial Mail Redzone event, because now, more than ever, consumers invest in brands that lead with purpose over profit. I'm Ariel Kelman from Tilt, and I'll be facilitating our chat and bringing your questions from the live chat to our rockstar panel. Speaking of which, here they are. Kinsani Nobanda, Group Executive, Group Marketing and Corporate Affairs at Nedbank. Ryan Parkhurst, Head of Marketing, Investec Wealth and Investment South Africa. Marilyn Datlo Munga, Director of Brand and Innovation at Kantar. And Masejo Mutsochi, Managing Director at Grid Worldwide. Now, amidst the rising global consideration into social causes such as climate change, gender equality, racial inclusion, and the like, how do brands make a sustained impact? And what is the role that brands should be playing in the social, cultural, and environmental ecosystem? These are big questions, so let's unpack. Kinsani, let me come to you first. We know that empathy appears to have become a brand mandate for many marketers. So the question I'm going to ask you is twofold. One, do you agree? Is the marketing community in South Africa very empathetic? And two, talk to us about getting big organizations and entire organizations, all the way up from the CEO down to the security guard, on the same page to practice empathy and really define a new meaning of profit.
Sure, that's an interesting question, Ari, and I actually really love it. I've never been asked if brands are empathetic or not, actually. I think it's also just contextual. So I'm going to start maybe a little more broadly. If you look at the leaders who did really well through the COVID-19 crisis last year, it just happened to be female leaders who were much more empathetic, right, in terms of the situation that was happening, in understanding how it was impacting families and lives beyond sort of just the COVID crisis itself. So you look at, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you look at Angela Merkel, those were women who led with empathy. And I think in that context, were able to do really well in terms of managing the crisis in their countries. That context is actually interesting for me because it's come across on brands, right? Because if you look at brands and how they've shown up through the COVID crisis, definitely brands that have been much more empathetic have been brands that have done well. And I'll speak maybe pretty specifically to Nedbank because obviously I work there. So if you think about how, and to be honest, although I'll say Nedbank, I think just the banking industry in general, if you look at how we responded through COVID, firstly, a simple thing like removing ATM transaction fees, then, giving payment holidays to our clients. Now think about it, as a bank, every month we want you to pay the loan that you owe us. So for us to be saying, actually, given how difficult what a time it is for you and the country and your family potentially, if you cannot, pay back your loans, or, we're very happy to give you, a payment holiday. And in fact, even though we said 3 months up front, we were pretty clear that if you came back to us and said, I'm still, in a difficult situation, we would continue to allow you to be able, to not pay us until such time where the country opened up. So I definitely think, that really was brands showing empathy during that time. And did it help us? Absolutely. So if I look at especially that first 3-4 months of the crisis, Nedbank had the best positive sentiment in terms of how people and clients felt we were responding to the crisis. They felt like we really understood what they were going through. And for me, why that's important is because when you come out of the crisis, right, you actually want people and your clients to remember what you did for them through what was potentially the hardest time in their lives. So empathy is not just for empathy's sake. I think empathy is also for financial sake, because actually you want to keep those clients as things get better, as things open up. And maybe just to end off, and I think it's not just something that, I guess as a bank for us, it wasn't even a, let's just do it for this period. I mean, every EXCO meeting that we would have started off with 2 key people in mind. One was our employees. Let's make sure that our employees keep their jobs. And how do we do that? Even though, and Ryan can attest to that, our headline earnings generally in banks all fell about 50%, right? Which is like, but the first thing for us was, how do we ensure that our employees keep their jobs? And then the second one was our clients, was how do we show up in a way for our clients that makes it easier for them to transition through this crisis. So I absolutely do think that empathy has played a bigger role and continues to play a bigger role from brands. And brands are now understanding that it's not just about being nice, but it's actually a long-term financial sort of lever that you can have, because it builds loyalty, it builds sentiment and consideration, all those good things and stuff. I mean, if I go back to maybe the bit around South African brands more empathetic, I honestly don't know, Ari. It's actually, and that's what I was saying, I've never been asked a question about our brands empathetic. I really like it. And potentially, Marilyn, it should be a Cantor study that you guys should do.
So let me come to Ryan then quickly while we're in the banking fraternity and the friends across the road in Sandton. If we look at this term return on empathy, right? And Ryan, in a marketing context, you have to go and sell this idea into the broader business, saying that we need to do certain things now that express ourselves as a purpose-led brand. I suddenly have an opinion on, is this business sustainable? Because I have to market that. Is this business practicing sort of best practice when it comes to empowering its people, because I then have to market that. So when we look at something like return on empathy in a space, in a category which is as commercial heavy as what banking and wealth and investment is, how do you start to broach that conversation? Because it really is playing the marketing game with a long game. And typically we tend to live from campaign to campaign, from insight to insight. But here, you almost have to say, well, look, who are we as a business? How are we as a business empathetic? Because that's what I need to market, and that's what I need to convey to this audience to whom that's important.
Thanks, Ari. Yeah, look, I think that return on empathy is business, more business, and it is growth. And that is ultimately via word of mouth and recognition of the hard and good job that one has done during the time of, whether it's the pandemic or, like Kansani says, over and above that in a sustained manner. So, look, I think that without empathy, you are nothing. And certainly in a services orientated business, such as financial services, there's nothing more important. How we partner with our clients on a daily basis, whether you're a big retail organization or very niche, it really is about making sure that you understand what the anxieties are of your clients, what's keeping them up at night. Now we all talk about that, but it really is very, very important for us to have a sense and a finger on the pulse as to what the clients are feeling, and to empower employees to be able to deliver that. Yes, we've got the functional aspects of making sure we can deliver X product, Y product, help enable clients during times that are certainly unprecedented. But I think it's also the softer things. It's the softer things around the edges that also really matter. And it's during these times that you really have got the opportunity to demonstrate, not talk about, but demonstrate what you stand for as a business, and to live that purpose. Because if you talk it, it means nothing. If you show it, it means everything. And so just a couple of practical examples, over and above, like I said, the functional things that we've, the various organizations have done brilliantly across all the different sectors is, just empowering clients with the right information. We're not really sure, how to navigate this plethora of information, whether you're going from Sky News to CNN to Fox to ENCA to SABC, so we try to empower our clients with good information that they could empower themselves and make their own opinions, and also provide a bit of escapism. We've enabled our clients to participate in, whether it's webcasts or whatever it is, in things that have nothing to do with the pandemic, and nothing to do with the financial landscape, but everything about just escaping and talking to people like, whether it's Ken Follett or Jeffrey Archer and these authors, and really providing an opportunity just to forget everything, because there were those moments where certainly myself, my team, just as human beings, we just did not want any more information. And so it was about balancing a bit of information empowerment and also providing escapism.
Marilyn, let me come to you to put a bit of an academic lens on things, a bit of a research lens on things. I mean, everyone was abuzz with the most valuable brands list in South Africa a couple of weeks ago. Everybody wants to see their name and their brand there. And when we unpack what it is that makes a brand valuable, a lot of that is attributed to how the consumer feels about them and where they rate them in terms of the brands that play a role in their life. When it comes to assessing what role empathy plays and the brand's demonstration and living of empathy in the mind of a consumer, where do we sit with that in a South African context? Obviously, things like price, the actual ability of the product are going to always be defining factors in how a consumer connects with a brand. But when we start to look at that softer side of things, and we look at the person who's in the pick and pay aisle now choosing one milk over another because they saw something about how sustainably that milk was sourced versus the other. Where do we start building what that new consumer kind of mind map and framework looks like in 2021 and beyond?
Sure. So thank you so much for the question. And indeed, let me be the first on the panel to use the cliche phrase of 2020 and 2021. We are, of course, in unprecedented times, right? And that calls for unprecedented action and brands really stepping up. So what we've learned from our consumers through the benefit of, consistent barometer reads on tracking consumer sentiment throughout the pandemic is, without fail, the most consistent theme is consumers really demanding brands to step up and play an active role in helping navigate the crisis, right? So 90% of our South African consumers say they want brands to pitch up in an actionable way to help them every single day. 80% say they want brands and corporations to really have a sense of values and really act in line with values and purpose. So absolutely critical. And important for our brand builders and business owners in the audience. And I think Kenzie and Ryan have alluded to it already. Purpose and doing the right thing is absolutely foundational, but it is critical in building the business as well. When we look at Brandsy and tracking locally and globally, we see that companies that have a strong sense of purpose and line up everything they do into being responsible corporate citizens grow 40% faster than those who don't. So really, purpose and being a good corporate citizen is not only the right thing to do, but it is proven to really move the needle on your brand value growth.
Sefo, talk to me about the client that comes with the brief that says, I've surveyed the audience and I know that sustainability and inclusion and diversity is very important to my audience that I'm trying to connect with. You then look at the brand and look at what its stances are on those things and how it's actually reflecting those narratives, and you're unable to make the connection between the brand doing what the audience wants and what the marketer is asking you as an agency to promote. How do you start to bridge a conversation like that? Because it almost feels like the purpose conversation becomes a marketer's conversation when actually it's an HR conversation, it's a senior leadership conversation, it's a supply chain conversation, it's an everything conversation. But the brands want to appear as this, even if their houses aren't necessarily in order.
Sure. That is such an important question, Ari. I've been in the fortunate position of having clients who are open to taking that opinion on and making something about it and doing something about it. And actually just tagging to a question that you had asked Kansani about, how do you transport that mission from CEO to security, to the security in the company? And it's of absolute importance that those two play with one another. They may not happen at the same time, but at least have the goal and ambition to do that. There's a term, employee value proposition, and it can easily sit in PowerPoint presentations and keynote presentations. But if it's not acted upon, then I think you will find yourself at risk of being discarded by audiences. So, I am going to use that term that comes very quickly before purpose, which is authenticity. You absolutely have to make sure that whatever you do internally does reflect on society, because we do live in a world where social media as well, it's so easy for your brand to take a turn for the worse, where people have negative conversations, which ultimately, will impact negatively on a brand. As Marilyn says, brands that are empathetic are the ones that seem to see, greater growth over time. So trying to do things that do not match missing that point of convergence between consumer and your employees plus the brand can lead to a place that is absolutely dismal for the brand. So yeah, I mean, I've been in the fortunate position, as I say, to work with clients. We've seen the likes of Google saying that they're giving their employees time off, etc. I happen to have a client that does similar things, simply because when we see profits do rise, it's absolutely important that we make sure that our employees, and I am putting myself as my client, but making sure that it does answer to those key levers of delivering on brand in totality. So it does involve the entire brand ecosystem. It involves HR, it involves the lady in the kitchen, because we do tend to look down on certain, sectors of the company. So yeah, it can't be a one-stream thing, Ari. You ask a question, but I think there's a great statement in that let's make sure that we do make sure that there is that key point of convergence and we don't miss a beat, lest we find ourselves in a terrible position in the long run.
It's amazing. One considers the power of a TVC or a really strong piece of copy. But also, and we saw it a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, how everybody just raves when someone like Nike tells all the employees to stay home. And does that sway a consumer? Ask many people in financial services and they'll say, when I saw that thing about Investec giving unlimited leave, I was just, wow, that's so amazing. I want to work at a place like that. And quantifying that kind of return on investment, because typically we don't measure stuff like that. We don't measure what announcements and fundamental business changes like that make. And it leads quite nicely into Pelisa's question on the live chat, which says, all of this sounds fantastic, but how are you measuring the return on investment? Or is that not a factor? And I'm going to take this one to the financial services representatives in the group, because if anyone knows their way around algorithm, it would be those guys. So Kansani and Ryan, when it comes to the return on investment and measuring what fundamental business decisions like that in the announcement thereof make in terms of acquiring new consumers, how do you start making that case? Because it's not like a TV ad where 10 million people saw it and 38,000 accounts were opened as a result. So how do you start building algorithms around that? Because ultimately that's what high senior leadership are going to want to see.
Yeah, firstly, it's really difficult, but maybe to take a step back to what Masego said around and I always say, so what is a brand, right? People love to think about the brand. I think about it as an iceberg. You see the top part of it, which is the TV ads, the billboards, and people generally think, oh, that's the brand. Actually, the stuff that's below the waterline is the stuff that is actually building the brand, which is the service you're getting, the products you're getting, the stances that organization is taking, for example, whether it's flexi leave, all of those things. For me, that's in totality a brand, right? And one of the things that we've strived to do at Nedbank is to say that means that the entire value chain that you experience at Nedbank, from our advertising to how the bank teller talks to you about the money in the branch, to everything has to be driven by our North Star, our purpose, which is to use our financial expertise to do good. And why we've done that is because if you look at our overall strategy as a bank, we've said that we will only be able to deliver on our objectives based on three things. One is the tech capability that we're putting in place to digitalize us as a bank. Two is the people, because you can put in as much tech into that, but from a service perspective and how you deliver on things, our people are important. But three is the brand. So we've recognized that actually for us to be able to be successful in our market and to grow, we need to have a strong brand. Now, how we track our brand is in many ways. So one, we have a monthly brand health check where we look at, firstly, the big statement around what our brand stands for, money experts who do good, to see how we're tracking on that and to make sure that we're tracking ahead of our competitors. We then look at what we call table stakes in banking, right? Why do people choose to bank with you? So digital, for example, has become a table stake. So we track how, as a brand, we are doing from a digital matrix perspective, month on month, as we're trying to change consumers' mindsets about how digital net bank is, right? Some people still think, maybe we give out checks, but actually we've got fantastic money apps and products and solutions and stuff. So we track that because we've got a firm belief that if we have a strong brand, actually it is the foundation to growing our overall organization. So it's not like Ari, necessarily we've got an algorithm that's telling, but we do understand, and we've seen it. It's like what Marilyn was saying, around 40% of brands who live their purpose, and living their purpose means you're doing it in your entire value chain. So when we announce things like from a corporate investment banking that by 2045, we're committed to net zero emissions in terms of our funding and our lending. Those are big statements that we understand actually build our brand overall. But it's difficult to say that it's 1, 2, 3 things that have done that, because actually what we are trying to do is the entire value chain, from Mike Brown, our chief executive, to when you interact to the teller at our branch. We're basically, the experience that you're getting from Nedbank is firmly built on our purpose.
Ryan, maybe back to the board.
Look, I think that whoever's written an Apex before has understood that one of the key aspects of writing an Apex Effectiveness Award is being able to isolate the contribution of marketing, advertising to business growth, whether it's to sustain, change, launch, etc. Some of it is quantifiable, and some of it is just a feeling. And I think that, certainly from when you mentioned, Investec, unlimited leave, yes, that's great. But what that's done as culturally is hold each other as employees accountable for delivering on our work. So we don't now, I don't apply my leave and it goes to my boss. I speak to my peers. I negotiate my leave. Now that changes the dynamic in totality. So when it comes to what Kenzani said just around, what a brand is, I also think it's the reflection of the organization's culture. And for us at Investec, I work in wealth and investment, but certainly the other divisions. For us, the culture is absolutely everything. You can go and replicate a product, a savings product, investment product, but you cannot replicate culture. You cannot replicate the culture of an organization and how that manifests in what you do for clients. We've got a saying, it's a really old sort of saying within Investec, we break China for clients. We're willing to do whatever it takes to really make sure that we deliver on those clients' needs. And hopefully that is, you can do something for an individual person that's got a dire need, and you break China for that client and help them. That's not gonna rock up on a brand tracker necessarily. That's gonna manifest at dinner conversations, around a braai or with friends, and that's really what counts for us. It's really that reflection of the culture and how we deliver service and value to our clients.
Ari, sorry, can I just come in? I love what Brian is saying around it's not going to rock up on the brand tracker, but what you're seeing, right, is that especially, so what we do is we try to look at what's impacting the conversation around Nedbank. Is it word of mouth? Is it TV? Is it social? And what you're finding over time is actually it's word of mouth, it's social. So it's no longer the things that you would expect, right? TV, radio, the stuff that we've got control over as marketeers. It's the stuff because you gave someone great service on something, or they then talk about it. But actually, it does build up. It's just that you can't isolate it. For me, it's an addition. And as long as you keep on doing those things consistently, linked to your purpose across every channel, it all adds up and helps you actually build your brand.
Now, Maseko, this is what scares every community manager managing a big brand on social media right now, is that gone are the days of brand monologue, my beautiful TVC that's curated, that you watch. And welcome to the days of, here's my TVC. Ooh, I really hope that they like it because I know that they're going to tell me. And if it's not great, it's going to trend on Twitter, which actually is very stressful when brands, marketing becomes a conversation versus a monologue, which is how the industry has been built. Where every font has been debated, every color palette has been debated by 50 people. And now all of a sudden it's saying, okay, cool, well, we're going to make this stuff and then people can actually respond to this. And although it feels quite native to us now, however many years we are into this kind of digital social media revolution, unfortunately, it places a huge demand on the marketers to be able to be accountable for what the brand is doing and be ready to take feedback, which, unfortunately, the other result of is sometimes then you don't want to get any negative feedback, so you kind of just play it safe. And then Ryan's saying, no, but there's gut and there's your feeling. But sometimes then your gut gets you trending on Twitter for the wrong reasons. So let's talk for a second about how purpose interjects into that, because it starts becoming very complicated. And the person on the other end of the Twitter account, when the ATM isn't working, is really the person that's then taking the heat. So talk to me for a second about brand conversations versus monologues, and how the thinking of the industry needs to change with that.
Yeah, so Ari, I mean, we've seen the change over the years. Our clients have noted it. You'll also notice that from a budget point of view, clients don't invest as much as they used to, at a TV level, if you like. And I think it comes through because of that understanding that we are now in a space where there is conversation. The screen, the second screen, those are things that make a big part of who we are and how we operate as an industry. So absolutely, it has become critical for us to make sure that, we are part of those conversations. But I think important for me is your intention, so if you are true to your purpose, it shouldn't come as a surprise when people converse with you on these social media platforms. And I feel that if you are truly intentional and understand your purpose, it also shouldn't be hard to tackle hard questions. So, we have seen brands like Nike who've stood steady in what they believe in, and there has been major backlash, but because they understand the reason why they are doing what they're doing in regards to diversity, inclusion, and those elements. It's been relatively, I mean, I don't sit in the Nike boardroom, but I imagine that it would have been a relatively easier conversation to have. What we also see is that clients are open to, a co-creation of adverts, if you like, with our audiences as well. So it's being open to those new opportunities and understanding that we are operating in a much more dynamic world than we previously did, and being ready to actually have those conversations. Look, I mean, sometimes you simply don't have to respond, because that certainly will bring backlash. But I think, if your spine is clear, if the spine of your brand is steady and you know where you're heading, it really shouldn't be a hard conversation to have or a hard challenge to actually take on. Yeah, I saw Ryan had his hand up and maybe he wanted to add something there.
Yeah, go for it, Ryan.
Look, I think you said it really well. It's very hard to navigate, but I think the key word here is fallibility. Brands are not machines, cold calculating things with no emotion. It's okay to sometimes be wrong. And if you accept that and you recognize it, and if you have got that spine, that is, you've got the clear conscience of what your intention is, and you make a mistake, it's okay. And I think there is something beautiful in brands that have the ability and the confidence to say, maybe, I did make a mistake. And I think that, that's just like how human behavior is. If you make a mistake, you put your hand up, you take the accountability, and people respect you for that as an individual or a brand.
It starts to go for it.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I mean, Ryan, that is so critical for me, because I often equate brands to human beings, because we are dealing with humans, right, as brands, and being able to bring out your personality. Obviously, don't be crass, but I do think that it's absolutely important that we recognize that human nature that we need to infuse in our brands, because we are dealing with people, emotions. We're living in unprecedented times, as you say. So how do we then humanize our brands to make sure that they can relate and converse with our audiences?
It's a great segue to asking Marilyn this question from June on the live chat, because yes, you can make mistakes. But June asks, what's the difference between oversharing as a brand and showing up during the time that needs a voice, like Black Lives Matter last year? And I guess the trick in a question like this is suddenly there's a social cause that you as a brand feel like you need to have an opinion on, but again, is your house itself in order? And do you have the credibility to actually create content and post around that? So Marilyn, yes, you can make mistakes, but this fine line between kind of oversharing and making sure that all the divisions are aligned so that you can comment on something, where do brands need to sit in that kind of context?
I think that's an excellent question. So thank you. I think it was Jade. Thank you for that question. So a part of the work we do is really helping our clients on a journey with their brands, right? And the first part of the journey is about, defining your purpose and what is your North Star, I think Kenzie called it, right? So really defining a compelling role for yourself in the world. And importantly, the second step is, how do I then bring that purpose to life? How does it come to life in my conversation calendar, across touch points in a very consistent way? And this is where the concept of being absolutely crystal clear on your brand character is so important. So defining your brand character beyond just a few adjectives of joyful or funny or humorous, like really spending time on unpacking the character in depth. The more clearly you understand how your brand comes to life through tonality, through a human persona, as Masejo says, the easier it is for you to make those calls. Is this my conversation or not? Is it in tune with what my brand is about? If you've got a character that is quite tongue-in-cheek, like Nando's, your conversation is almost anything where it allows you to bring to life the kind of beautiful brand purpose of being, the voice of the everyman, the quirky tongue-in-cheek voice of everyday man who can get involved in who has the license to do that, right? So really acting in a way that's consistent with how you've defined your character gives you a very concrete steer on, am I being opportunistic by jumping on this topic? Or is this an intuitive, natural fit for what my brand is about?
We're live this morning on the Financial Mail Redzone, asking what does it mean to be a purpose-led brand? Chatting to Kinsani Nobanda, Group Executive, Group Marketing and Corporate Affairs at Nedbank, Ryan Parkhurst, Head of Marketing, Investec Wealth and Investment SA, Marilyn Datlo-Munga, Director of Brand and Innovation at Kantar, and Masejo Motsohi, Managing Director at Grid Worldwide. And we're starting to get very esoteric and poetic as marketeers. We've got a question from Elizabeth coming through on the live chat, which is quite tangible, quite action-led. What does the purpose actually look like? Ryan, I'm going to direct it to you because you spoke a little around the importance of kind of editorial a little earlier on as a brand. Elizabeth wants to know, how can brands use editorial to boost their messages to show that they are there for the customer? Is there a set strategy one can use? Are any of the panelists using editorial content in their strategy? And this, by the way, is every publisher's worst nightmare, because suddenly now the brand is creating content around the market update and what it means, whereas before that was their job, and now they've taken all the people from the news agency and they now work in-house. So it's a little scary for everyone, but let's broach this idea of brands and the big buzzword of content creation, whether that's article, podcasts, videos, whatever that is.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. So I think one of the big things to consider here is you need to utilize whatever platform it is in an authentic, complementary way to reflect your purpose. What I do want to say is that if you are trying to create a purpose or find your purpose, it's probably too late. If you are trying to create one. It's definitely going to be inauthentic. Purpose comes from the history of the brand. It is in the historical DNA somewhere that you have to go and dig up and pull out. It's part of founders or something that's historic in the brand or the foundation of the business. So from an editorial point of view, do I, from a wealth and investment point of view, do we look for specific editorial opportunities? Not necessarily. I think we try to broach topics, talk about pieces or thematics that help us, articulate what our purpose is. And that's, we don't live in society. We don't live off society. We live in society. And that's really, if you draw a circle around, our business, we it's not just about, doing as well as you can for the shareholders. It's making a meaningful, long-term, sustained impact. And if there are the right opportunities that help you tell that story, whether it's in content, wherever it may be, then that's great. But if you're trying to carve out little mini billboards to tell everybody what your purpose is, well, then I think you're doomed to fail because you've got to demonstrate it.
And Kansani, there's definitely a shift that has to happen in terms of the actual people that work in marketing divisions, right? I mean, you go to university, they're probably still doing the X amount of P's, whatever those were, price, place, product. And, there's a SWOT analysis with the competitors, and I can see that marketing textbook ingrained in my mind. There was not a chapter on purpose, and there was not a chapter on empathy. And there also wasn't a chapter on a marketer having to debrief something that's more than 30 seconds long and is a glorious TVC when it's a long form content piece speaking about what's happening in the market, and it's a 30-minute session. So talk to me about the upskilling, and I guess you can speak to your team in terms of, the team really understanding what is the purpose, how does it infuse with this work, and what happens when the work is longer than 30 seconds?
Yeah, so it's such a great area. And I'll maybe reveal my age here. When I started in marketing at Unilever as the Rama assistant brand manager, there were many things we didn't talk about, including digital marketing and purpose. So the upskilling in the last few years has been significant. It's actually, whenever people ask me, how do you build a great marketing career? One of the pillars I always say is curiosity, because I think you're constantly learning and growing. And if you're not curious and want to do that, you'll be left behind. But when it comes to the upskilling bit, I think firstly for us as an organization, so it's funny when Ryan says, if you haven't have a purpose, it's already too late and stuff. Actually, if you look at Nedbank's purpose, it comes, because I always say brands have roots, and he's absolutely right. Our purpose comes from the root of who we are. People have always spoken about Nedbank as like, the caring bank, the green bank. So a lot of what our purpose speaks to comes from what people have said to us in the past. We've just now articulated it so that the entire 27,000 people at Nedbank are able to articulate it and know what it means. We then have to do quite a bit of work on trying to teach people what it actually means beyond just the piece of paper, right? But how we're actually living it. And it's interesting. We started marketing excellence awards internally last year. And one of the ladies who was a judge on the awards, she actually was at Cantor previously, she's now gone to Wonderman. She made the point that every entry that she saw for the Marketing Excellence Award actually spoke about our purpose, which shocked her. And I said to her, that's because and we start literally from our briefing documents. How is this building on our purpose? Because we actually want, when the agencies come back with the work, to be able to articulate it in a purpose-led manner. It's not always perfect. I can tell you that for sure. There's many products and services that we do sometimes that don't quite fit into exactly what our purpose is. But that it's part of the learning journey, because now, what we're doing is also with the product teams, the guys who actually create these services, is to try and say to them, how does this really build on Nedbank's purpose? So that by the time it gets to the marketing team, it's actually easy for us. We're just, we're just basically creating marketing for something that's already been built on our purpose. So it's a lot more easier. And then I think one of the fundamental changes we did as a bank is last year, we created an employee value proposition, which was built from our purpose. So we've now got we talk about our client experience and our employee experience both being built from our purpose, which then means and our employee experience bit is around you actually work in an environment where you can be the difference. You can make a positive impact on society. You can do, and that really comes from our overall purpose. So what that means now is that people start to think about, what does that mean in terms of my daily job? How do I be the difference? How do I, and even when we recruit externally, that's how we are recruiting. So I would say, Ari, like the growth and the learning curve in terms of really, okay, in fact, here's what I'd say. If you go to a branch right now and you're to ask any of our tailors, what's the purpose of the bank? They'll tell you. I can tell you. I can put money on it that they'll tell you. Are we living it every day? I don't think so. So part of our biggest journey right now is ensuring that we are infusing that purpose in everything that we do, so that even as marketeers, I'm not just taking a product and putting lipstick on it and saying it's actually built on our purpose, but it actually from the onset, when the R&D team have thought about it, it's already built on how do we land this for purpose. So by the time I give it to Kenz's team to take to market, actually, we're just selling what's already got our purpose infused in it. But it's been a massive learning curve, especially for people who only want to sell a home loan. That's all they want. They just tell you, I just want to sell a home loan. When you're saying to them, but what is the impact of that home loan for that family? If you talk about it in that way, then it's not a home loan that comes from Investec. It's a little bit different, right? Because Investec will talk about it differently. Or if even in how that home loan is made up, how is it different based on who we are as a bank? So it's a massive learning curve for us, and it's a journey that we're still on. So I don't think we're anywhere near harnessing the full power of our purpose.
But that's probably, Kinsani, the baseline of the iceberg, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Marilyn, I know you wanted to pick up on what Kinsani was saying. Talk to us.
I just said the comment. I mean, of course, we've got Ryan and Kinsey who come from, some of the top brands in the country and have clearly defined purposes. But I mean, I do think some brands are still on a journey, right? And sometimes it's not as easy as just tapping into your heritage, because of course, Investec, Nedbank, very rich heritage. I mean, these are stellar brands in the landscape. So sometimes it's not just about understanding your own company's heritage and where they're from, but sometimes it's about looking externally and finding what we call at Cantor cultural tensions, right? So what are the issues that society is dealing with? And we even call them cultural villains. So what are the accepted beliefs in culture and in the world that people hold and almost create barriers for people to progressing? So an example, if we think of Dove, the cultural villain that they identified is this, stock standard definition created by the industry about what beauty is about. And they found that cultural villain, and they really defined their brand's role in the dialogue as, addressing that cultural villain and almost taking that villain down in culture and championing what they call real beauty. So sometimes finding your purpose, the Dove purpose, championing real beauty, is about looking outside of the company and identifying, those real challenges in society and defining a meaningful role for your business and your brand in addressing the challenge. And that's really the heart of finding purpose sometimes, is looking externally and then figuring out, what is my culture, my history, my heritage, and how does that add credibility in playing a role in taking on that villain in society. So just if there's marketers out there that feel like they don't have the benefit of 100 years of being in the market or 50 years in the market, there's still a purpose for you to be found.
I still think, though, Marilyn, and the Dove brand is an interesting one, right? Because I still think there was something that, I think if Lux had done that, for example, it wouldn't have landed as authentically as Dove doing it. So there has to be something in your DNA, in your background, Absolutely. That allows you to latch onto that social, cultural narrative and be able to allow you to authentically talk about real beauty. Because there's many brands who, if they spoke about real beauty, everyone would have been like, oh, guys, not you. Like, you know what I mean? But Dove, I think, inherently had that in their DNA. And maybe just a little quick story, Ari, because I was at Unilever when Dove, took on the purpose of real beauty and stuff. And, you talk about your purpose has to go, I think, Maseko said from the CEO to the lady who cleans and stuff. The board of Unilever globally actually had to buy into what Dove was trying to do, because if you think about it, it was going against what beauty brands were talking about at that time. And the agency was Ogilvy. And the story of how they went and sold this to the board, they basically went and interviewed all the board members' daughters who were under 15 years old. And they asked them, what's the one thing that what do you love about your body and yourself? And these kids had hardly anything to say. And then when they asked them, what's the thing that you hate about your body? And they had so much to say. So they now put in front of the board of directors their own kids struggling to articulate what they love about themselves because of how the beauty industry has portrayed itself. And that's when the board said, this is it, where, we absolutely buy into this. And that's why I think Dove has been so successful in the space, because it has come with support from the very top and then obviously been driven all the way across the organization.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to complement what's the conversation here, Marilyn and Gensi yourself, is that I don't think it's an either or. I think always having a pulse on what tension you can solve in the world and what role you can play in the world will make your purpose land a lot better. So I think if you mix the two up, and you really find the hallowed ground between those two, your purpose can be a source of competitive advantage, pretty simply.
We're going to go to closing questions now. And Maseko, I'm going to pick up on the conversation that we've been having to kind of land what your final question is, as an agency on the other end of the budget cuts amidst global pandemics, are clients and brands giving enough scope and enough resource to someone in agency going and interviewing all the executive board members' children when that idea comes to the table? Or as an industry, are we a little bit too reactive? Would you like to see more hours shifted to the purpose conversation? If the CFO was looking at this, that would be how they would phrase the question.
Sure. So I definitely think that there is room to dedicate more efforts towards that, Ari. It goes without saying. Meryl has spoken to it. The conversation has been around that if you do define your purpose coming from your history and your legacy, it does work better for the brand. So certainly, I don't think there is enough that's being done. But I also, tagging on to the conversation that's been had, I don't think every brand requires to go out there and parade its purpose. If it's non-existent, rather be your authentic, frivolous self and carry on as you are. But in short, I do think that we could do more. We do live in a society that's issue-laden. We operate in communities that I think we need to present ourselves as good citizens within, and defining purposes or having purposes that really focus on the communities we work around, helping those as we do with our employees as well. It does bode for a better brand going forward and a better world. I mean, I imagine that the reason why we do get to these points as organizations, as marketing companies, as agencies, is because we want to see a sustainable world for our brands and ourselves as humans. So it only makes for a good story to tell, to borrow from some political realms, to actually deliver a good world for ourselves, for those coming behind us, that's it, actually, for the goodness of society and ourselves in the long run.
And Marilyn, maybe just for a second, emphasize the upside of having this conversation. And Maseko is right, not every brand needs to parade its purpose, because certainly if you're parading it, it probably is coming off as quite inauthentic. But talk to me academically about the upside of really being a little bit more reflective in the mirror every morning as that iceberg, as that brand.
Sorry, Ari, do you mind just repeating the question?
Yeah, sure. I think it's just around kind of the upside of when you follow what we've been discussing this morning, the ROI and the kind of the return on investment that comes with that.
Sure, absolutely. So we spend a lot of time, tracking what sets apart overperforming brands and businesses from underperforming brands and businesses, and we like to track it on a kind of long-term basis, right? So we really see what are the things that set them apart, and absolutely, having this consistent. And I think the panel has spoken to it. So if I could just underline it with data, that just kind of really bolsters what everyone has been saying. So what we found is that companies that overperformers are way more likely. So 90% of overperforming companies link every single thing they do to a clear sense of purpose. So the data behind it is absolutely kind of indisputable. So yeah, I think that it's really proven to be an exercise that drives ROI. And certainly long-term sustainable growth. So when we look at the future, so that's kind of looking backwards at what has happened with overperformance and underperformance. But when we look into the future, some of the customer segments that a lot of our clients look to for growth are the youth. So a lot of clients, really need to get the youth's buy-in. And of course, looking for growth across the continent. So sometimes growth in South Africa is not enough. Businesses want to expand on the continent. And when we look at those kind of consumer segments, so your youth segment, the rest of Africa, the role of sustainability, so total sustainability. So you're thinking social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and the full value chain. The role of all of those kind of sustainability elements in driving positive consumer sentiment is so much more important when you're thinking about winning with youth. Our Gen Z, they're almost born activists. They're demanding brands that deliver purpose. And people often think that issues of sustainability are almost first world problems, but in Africa, environmental sustainability and social sustainability is really top of mind for consumers. So point is, when you're looking for growth into the future, having a clear sense of purpose and winning with the youth and winning on the continent, purpose and being a good corporate citizen is going to be more important than ever.
Janine on the live chat says, we need to think about circular economic models. We have a responsibility to society, and that in turn will provide a social license to operate as we deliver more than just transactional value. And it certainly rounds out what you were saying there, Marilyn. Ryan, let me come to you with the final question for you. As the guy that has a massive SDG themed campaign running at the very moment, just a final message to the marketers that are perhaps a little bit afraid to even start having this conversation, because for them, they've always been led by price point and product, and how those two things come about has kind of been in isolation. You give me the thing and I sell it to people. Why should they dig a little deeper into their organizations to find out what's influencing that product?
Yeah, so I think I just want to respond to the question that came through in the chat. It made me think about, and I hope I do the quote justice. I remember it was the first Fast Company magazine I got from the States in 2009. And in this, they spoke a little bit about purpose. And in this quote or paragraph, it was talking about doing well and doing good. There was a section that I remember quoting a few times in my MBA, and it went something like this. Unlike the chaos butterfly theory, business is not an uncalculating force of nature that swings a pickaxe at a profit quarry. It is and behaves with intention, and so it should be doing so. So I think they wrote it a lot more poetically, but it did stick out. I think it is, we behave with intention. And I think that, in order to, and then to just bridge over to your question now, I think that how we sell, because ultimately, why does marketing exist? We exist to build the brand and fuel future growth for the business. And how we go about selling is not on a print ad anymore. This is the car, this is the make, this is, the kilowatts, etc. That's not how we sell. How we sell is fundamentally changed. It's born out of the basis of trust, being authentic, and building a sense of belief in what you're offering over and above just the product you may be selling. So, we've got a campaign now that's really just educating as many people as we can, our clients, our staff, called the Class of 2030, and it's on Instagram if you want to have a squiz. And there's no product, there's very little branding embedded in it, for which I've got a lot of heat. Why is Investec, not on this handle on Instagram? But I think it's important that we need to be able to demonstrate that it's not just about getting financial return, but also societal return and doing good.
Well, let's land with Kinsani on the butterfly effect, the idea of a butterfly flapping its wings in Johannesburg, South Africa, and it resonating all around the world to major wind forces. What's the one thought that you can leave us with this morning, Kensi, that might spark somewhat of a butterfly effect for the marketer who's walking into the office right now? Actually, has already been at their desk for probably about 4 or 5 hours and is on a deadline, and they're on draft 59 of the video. Your sort of parting thought to start that butterfly effect?
Yeah, maybe I want to reflect a little bit on what Masego said around not every brand has to have a purpose. I think maybe I maybe don't agree with that. I think every brand has to be clear who they are, what they stand for. And even if it's not as, let me say, heavy, or it's, whatever, maybe it's to give joy, right? Like Coca-Cola. So if you think about it, purpose doesn't always have to be, I guess, as heavy as we make it out to be. But from a butterfly effect, I love that quote, Ryan. For me, maybe just to end off, I think there's two things I fundamentally believe. So one, I fundamentally believe that for Nedbank to be a sustainable business, the continent, Africa and South Africa, have to be sustainable and successful. And that is why, for us, actually living our purpose and doing good in society is not just CSI, and it's actually about long-term sustainability of our business. And I think once you understand that, you start to change your mind around, what does purpose really mean. I think the second thing to end off with is you don't have to be in every conversation. It has to be true and authentic to who you are as a brand. I have seen many conversations on social media where my team comes to me and says, Kensi, let's do this and talk about this. And I go, not Nedbank. That is not our conversation to be in. It would be inauthentic. But I've seen many conversations where we are authentically the right people to have an opinion on, to drive the conversation with. So as long as you do it authentically, you might make mistakes here and there, but that's okay. So for me, I think if people just understand that purpose is not about CSI, it's a fundamental pillar to growing your business and ensuring that it's sustainable in the future, I think you start looking at it differently, including your CFO.
Well, what an interesting conversation, and certainly what an insightful conversation it would have been around that time a few years ago, where everyone was saying, what does the CSI thing mean? What is that even? Now, all of a sudden, I need to give money to charity. And it's interesting to see how that conversation has evolved and how that's become a bedrock and a cornerstone of what many brands need to root themselves in moving forward to authentically connect with audiences and continue to do what they've done before, but obviously with a little bit of a different lens. So I try to make it an algorithm. To everyone watching the audience, I asked them, what is the secret here? How do we plug this into a data set and figure out this purpose thing? What is the ROI? But perhaps the whole point is that there is none, and that's the beauty of the journey and the beauty of what purpose is, something that you continue to discover and have as a guiding North Star. This morning, we've asked live, what does it mean to be a purpose-led brand? The philosophers answering that question have been Kinsani Nobanda, Group Executive, Group Marketing and Corporate Affairs at Nedbank, Ryan Parkhurst, Head of Marketing, Investec, Wealth and Investment South Africa, Marilyn Datlow Munga, Director of Brand and Innovation at Kantar, and Masego Motsogi, Managing Director at Grid Worldwide. If you missed any of this, it'll be available on the Financial Mail and Redzone platforms almost immediately after this. And we look forward to seeing you in our next live webcast towards the end of the month. Have a wonderful, purpose-led day. Bye.